It's time to talk about the most surprising movies I've ever seen. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going through my top 10 most surprising movies of all time. Now, these are not movies with the biggest shock value or biggest twists. More so, they're movies that I went into with little expectations or didn't think they would be all that, and ended up coming out and really enjoying, thinking they were very good movies. And also, these movies had to have little to no buzz and not the greatest marketing, but the biggest factor is I had to actually see these movies in theaters in order for them to make this list. So before I get into this list, drop your most surprising films of all time in the comments down below, and be sure to hit that like button, subscribe into that notification bell to help reach my goal of 100,000 subscribers here on the channel. It would mean a lot. And check out the Unusual Couple podcast link down below with myself and my girlfriend Cam. We have weekly episodes over there. But let's just go ahead and get into this list. So coming in at number 10 for me is White House Down. This movie came out in 2013 in June, and I vividly remember going to the theater with my brother with kind of no expectations, and I walked out with a big smile on my face. Like, I had a really fun time with this. If you don't know what it is, it's basically the plot of Die Hard with the White House. You've got Jamie Foxx playing the president, and Channing Tatum is essentially John McClane of the film, but it's still super enjoyable. Like, this is a go-to action movie if it's like a rainy Sunday afternoon and it's on cable, like the channel FX. There have been many times in my life where I watched it in like 2015 or 2016 in the summer and just had a blast with it. Like, it's a fun, self-aware movie. Blatant ripoff of Die Hard, yes, but Die Hard is so good and created this subgenre of action films that I can't really blame any movie for wanting to take significant inspiration from it. So really enjoyed White House Down, and it surprised me because I thought it was going to be a pretty forgettable action film. It's probably one of the more memorable from the 2010s, at least to me personally. But at number 9 on my list, I've got No Hard Feelings. This is probably the most recent film on this list. It came out this summer, only a few months ago, and I thought it would be a fine, romantic comedy of sorts, but it was a lot deeper than that. Like, yes, the movie's funny and it's got its laugh out loud moments, but it's also got a very powerful message about like change and moving into a new phase of life, and that resonates deeply with me. Jennifer Lawrence kills it here. Would not mind if she got nominated for an Oscar because she's that funny, but also plays the heartfelt scenes really well. The movie commits fully, and I respect it for that, and it's one that I want to watch again sometime soon. Really surprised me, and it might end up making my top 10 favorite films of this year. But number 8 on my list is going to be Mid-90s. This is Jonah Hill's directorial debut, and it's only about an hour and 20 minutes, like one of the shortest movies I've ever seen in theaters. And it's a really solid coming-of-age movie. Like, I went in expecting it to be and I walked out being like, that's probably my favorite A24 movie. It's definitely in contention. I'd say like top 5 A24 of all time. Mind you, this came out in 2018, so we've had a lot of A24 films since then, but I was really surprised with how much I enjoyed the film. It's a simple story. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross composed the film, and their score is very subtle but impactful. And it's a movie that reminds me of growing up, hanging out with my friends, and coming of age, essentially. This is one of those coming of age movies that I highly recommend. It goes really under the radar, so if you haven't seen it, check it out. It really surprised me, and I watched it in theaters. But at number 7 on my list, I've got The Adam Project. This actually I didn't see in theaters because it went straight to streaming, but same difference. It came out early in 2022. It stars Walker Scobell, Ryan Reynolds, and Mark Ruffalo. This movie will pull on your heartstrings. It's this futuristic time travel sort of sci-fi film, but underneath all of that, there's a really sentimental message about family. There's a scene near the end of this movie that always gets the waterworks going. I've seen the movie twice, and when I first watched it, I was like, that was fine, but on rewatch is when I really grew to appreciate it a lot more. It's a movie that I could see myself watching years from now and being like, damn, this was a hidden gem of the 2020s. If you haven't seen The Adam Project, check it out. I think the reason it makes this list is because it's one of those straight to Netflix movies, and a lot of times they'll have these big budgets and be just the most generic throwaway movies ever, but The Adam Project was so much more than that, and I think Ryan Reynolds' charisma matched with Walker Scobell's personality really make this movie what it is. They technically play the same character in the movie, just one is an older version. There's a lot to love with The Adam Project, and it'll put a smile on your face by the end of the movie. Give it a chance if you haven't seen it. But at number 6 on my list, I've got The Internship. Saw this one in theaters with my buddies back in summer of 2013. It's a comedy starring Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson, and that had me sold, but sometimes these, comedy films during this era could either be big hits or big misses. I was kind of iffy based on the marketing this one. I was like, I don't know, it looks like they might reveal all the jokes in the marketing. Fortunately, this was a big hit. And I didn't know at the time, but it's actually directed by Shawn Levy. That is 2 Shawn Levy films in a row on this list. In a way, this is an underdog story where you're rooting for Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson's characters to go in and kick ass with this Google internship. But Dylan O'Brien also has a supporting role in this film, and his comedic timing is on point. There's a lot of references to other movies here. There's literally a whole entire scene where they play a game of Quidditch from Harry Potter, and it's just a really heartfelt comedy. Like, yes, it's got some big laughs for sure, but I'd argue the movie is more of just a feel-good dramedy than a straight up comedy, and that's my cup of tea. If a movie makes me feel good and like by the end I almost have my heart warmed, it did its job. And while this isn't the outright funniest movie I've ever seen, it gave me a lot more than that by just making me feel good inside. So I was really surprised walking out of the theater saying, man, that wasn't only funny, but it was also really heartfelt and hit right in the feels. But bringing us into my top 5, I've got The Big Sick. This is a movie starring Kumail Nanjiani. He actually got nominated for an Oscar for writing the screenplay. And this is a movie that went way under everyone's radar. Like, no one was talking about it. I went and saw this with my buddy in theaters, and we were like the only dudes in the theater because it is sort of a rom-com chick flick movie. But it's hilarious. Like, Kumail Nanjiani, this is the first thing I ever saw him in. I know he was in Silicon Valley, and he's obviously, you know, Kingo in the Eternals now. He's been getting a lot more spotlight, but this is like his first big movie, and it worked for me. Ray Romano and Holly Hunter play the parents of this girl that he falls in love with, and it's this unconventional romance that shouldn't work on paper, but it ends up warming your heart over the course of the movie. It's got laugh-out-loud funny moments, specifically one involving a drive-thru where Kumail is like going off on this drive-thru worker.
Put 4 slices of cheese on the burger!
And there are some really clever jokes throughout this film, but it's one of those romance films that will just make you feel happy when you watch it, and by the end, you can't help but smile and possibly shed a tear. So, went in expecting a pretty run-of-the-mill rom-com, was like, I don't know about this, walked out elated and was like, man, that might be one of the better movies of 2017. But coming at number 4 on my list is X-Men Days of Future Past. When this film was being marketed, I thought it was a little gimmicky. Obviously, I was hyped to see the return of the OG X-Men with, you know, Professor Charles Xavier and Magneto, matched with the newer generation of X-Men from the First Class film, Wolverine, of course, being back as well. But when I went and saw the movie, I was like, I don't know about this, and I walked out like, that might be the best X-Men film I've ever seen. It handles time travel really well. Wolverine being sort of the mediator between the old generation and new generation was perfect, but to me, this is the best we see Michael Fassbender's Magneto and the best we see McAvoy as Professor X. Both own the roles, and seeing them with the older generation of themselves was perfect. And you want to talk about being ahead of its time, this is a film that in a way conquers the whole AI concept, and it delves into rewriting history of assassination attempts. This movie has it all, from history to sci-fi, and it's just a really good X-Men film that gave us the awesome Quicksilver scene with the Time in a Bottle song. Like, how could you not love Days of Future Past? It might be the best X-Men film straight up. But coming at number 3 on my list, I've got A Quiet Place. I went and saw this movie in theaters. I knew John Krasinski was in it and directed it, but I didn't really know much about it. A lot of times horror marketing can be very cliche, and this made it look like any other run-of-the-mill horror movie, but it's a lot deeper than that. Obviously, Emily Blunt and John Krasinski are amazing in their roles, and the actress whose name's escaping me, who's actually deaf in real life and is deaf in the film, killed it here. She was one of the highlights of the movie. But this was a movie that's only an hour and a half. The concept is so terrifying. When you go in the theater and you're in a packed crowd and it's dead silent through the entire runtime, you know the movie's doing something right. The concept is horrifying. It's executed so well as it plays on this fear of making a noise, and there's a scene in the middle of the movie with John Krasinski's character always breaks my heart, and he is such a fantastic actor in this. Plus, he got to shine as a director here. Like, what's not to love about A Quiet Place? It's one of the better horror films I've actually seen in theaters. It was such a cool experience. But my runner-up for the most surprised I've ever been by a movie is Bullet Train. I actually didn't see this one in theaters, but I caught it right when it went to digital, so that's why it did make this list. Bullet Train was a film that had, again, generic marketing, looked like a pretty average action movie, but I went and watched it, and I fell in love with this. I actually watched it on a plane to go visit my buddy in California, and then that weekend, I actually watched the movie again. I've seen it 3 times now, and it's got a star-studded ensemble cast starring Brad Pitt, Brian Tyree Henry, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Sandra Bullock has a role in here. You got a cameo from Channing Tatum and Ryan Reynolds. Like, this movie's loaded with stars, and there are cameos you wouldn't even expect. It's action-packed, most of the film taking place on a train, so if you like one-location movies, this is for you. But it's also highly stylized with some sword fights, and just Brad Pitt's character gets in these situations where he doesn't want to kill somebody, but he ends up doing it just based on luck. It's a very fun, over-the-top movie. Some people say it has that Tarantino style, and I can see where they're coming from. It's a movie with twists and turns you won't see coming. Again, super highly stylized action, and it flies by. I love one-location movies, and this all takes place on a bullet train. How could you not love Brad Pitt and his charisma? This movie rules, and it's actually one of my favorite action movies, maybe ever, especially one of my favorite movies from last year. But taking the top spot for the most surprising movie of all time, to me, is Pixar's Onward. I will always sing my praises for this movie. I think it's the most underrated, underappreciated, slept-on Pixar film ever created, and because it came out about a week before the pandemic hit, and so no one really went and saw it because theaters in the world shut down, so it didn't really get the attention it deserved. Now, it went to streaming on Disney Plus, and I think it got a bit of a second life over there, but this is a film that hits right in the feels to me. It is a brotherhood story, a fatherhood story, and a fantasy film. It's just a really immersive world, and it's unlike anything else we'd really seen from Pixar, because normally, you know, we got Cars, Toy Story. This creates this whole fantasy world, and it was really neat to explore. It's got the adventurous vibes of like an Indiana Jones film, even with nods to Raiders of the Lost Ark. But above all else, this film pulls on the heartstrings at the end with a real brotherhood story, and that just resonates really deeply with me as I myself have an older brother. It's a quick hitter movie like most Pixar films. It gets the waterworks going, and it's fun. I just love this movie. I never understood why it was dismissed. I think it was really unfortunate timing when the movie ended up coming out. But there's a lot to love with Onward. I think it's the best Pixar film of the 2020s so far, and so many people continue to dismiss this one online or in the comments, and I just never understood that. It really surprised me. I cried in the theater, and if a movie makes me do that, it's probably pretty damn good. So Onward takes the top spot on this list. But those are just my top 10 most surprising movies of all time. Let me know yours in the comments down below, and be sure to hit that like button. Subscribe and hit that notification bell to help me reach my goal of 100,000 subscribers here on the channel. It would mean a lot. And stay tuned for more content coming very soon. But thank you as always for watching. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.